we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everybody to week 7 of our Better 52 webinar series, where we've committed to 52 weeks of offering value to help loan officers get better. I guess it's really trying to keep it simple. My name is Rene Rodriguez. I'm the founder of BetterLoanOfficers.com, and this is brought to you by BetterLoanOfficers.com. And just a brief overview as to why we're all here and what Better Loan Officers is and why we've decided to do this. Better Loan Officers was something I founded back in 2013, and currently we are a review management software solely focused on the mortgage industry, where you can search, find, and review any loan officer in the country, and where we offer you also powerful tools where you can leverage and improve your online reputation. And currently we are the largest database out there with over 500,000 profiles in the system. So if you're on this call and you have an active NMLS ID, you do have a profile on our account. So make sure that you do go ahead and sign up for that as well. And I'm just going to hit Brian, just make sure you're hitting the record button as well. Okay, it's being recorded. Good. Our vision is pretty simple. We want to be the voice and the currency of trust for the mortgage industry. If you're on this call and you're a loan officer, you've been through the ringer over the last several years with regulation and changes and having to deal with the decisions of previous loan officers that have left the industry, now leaving you to deal with the lack of trust and some of the stresses. For some of you, that's an opportunity because you know how to deal with it. For some of you, maybe you found some stress and how to manage through that. So we're trying to create some things where we want to be the voice and currency of trust. But the way that we do that, our vision is to provide you tools that give you a voice that conveys trust and professionalism with consumers and referral partners by providing a central place where agents and consumers can find quality loan officers like yourselves. So if you do have not done this, please make sure to go to our site and enter, when you click up here to the Better for Loan Officers page, you'll enter your NMLS ID and click that search button. It'll bring you to the search results. You'll find your unclaimed, if you haven't done it, profile. Make sure that you click on Claim Your Profile, and it'll bring you to this piece to claim it. The reason why you want to do it gives you a beautiful profile. Once you get it filled out and you have loan officers, you have consumers and agents that have reviewed you, you'll be able to showcase who you are, download the pro sheet, be ethos verified, all sorts of pieces where you are rated in communication, accuracy, responsiveness, turnaround, collecting all of your testimonials, and of course being able to connect more. And we love the on-time closing percentage. So really brief on some of those pieces. Of course, I can always answer questions at the end. So why are we here? Oftentimes, I think all of us, if we've been in business, especially in the mortgage industry, we've created a business plan. And that business plan takes us in a certain direction. And yet most of us, if we've ever set a goal, probably had some stress in trying to figure out why is it that we did not achieve that goal. And oftentimes, even though we've set a plan out, some of the internal pieces maybe inside of us, maybe around our business, maybe haven't been fully aligned. And so what we're trying to do here is, again, help you set that goal, but align all of the different elements over the next 52 weeks to really get you focused into that next level. And whatever the next level is, excuse me, whatever that level of achievement is, you define by you, and that's really what our Better 52 is about. So today, we're going to be going to a specific tool. So the structure of these Better 52 pieces, as we go each month, we're going to be choosing a topic. And the first week, we go into an introduction of that topic, which we went into the powerful introduction, and specifically the power of first impression. You learned about System 1, you learned about System 2, and the brain and how it interprets that. And week 2 is always about a specific tool, and we're going to go into what we call the influence equation. This was something that I was created in helping executives, sales professionals, and competitors, people that are being interviewed. How do they influence and put together a very simple sequence to influence behavior? That is the one thing that we all have in common. And when I work with professional speakers, or when I work with executives, people that are leading meetings and being in front of the room, everybody always wants to talk about public speaking, but my first goal with them is to get them to reappraise that, reevaluate, and look at this, not just about public speaking, but how do you influence behavior? If you're in the sales profession, your job is to influence behavior. If you're a parent, your job is to influence behavior. And so this is an equation, a 3-step process that I put together over the years to help do that. And before we get into that, there's some pre-work that I want to do to make sure that we're all on the same page to understand what that means and how we get there. So you'll be seeing that I'm using the influence equation as I'm teaching you the influence equation. So by the end, you'll see the methodology and how it works and have some time to practice. So if you recall, all of this is based on the 6 money-making activities as well. And so remember, in sales, there are only 6 ways that you make money. And the first one is prospecting, with getting the result of generating leads. Once you generate leads, of course, you have the activity of setting an appointment with those leads to then have a date, time, and a place. This is the beginning of that sales process, where most people don't know what the sales process is or how it works. This is the foundation there. And once you have a date, time, and a place, you have a presentation arena. So when it comes to that introduction, you're introducing yourself in the prospecting activity. You're introducing yourself in the setting appointments. You're introducing yourself in the presentation. And some of those happen in the same meeting. And so we want to make sure that you're prepared for that piece. And in my years of working with different sales groups, one of the things we run up against is most people have some level of sales call reluctance. And there's lots of ways to overcome sales call reluctance. In fact, we know specifically 12 different forms of sales call reluctance. But what I have discovered, if I can help somebody be very comfortable and confident with how they introduce themselves, how they set themselves apart, how they differentiate themselves quickly, that the sales call reluctance is almost virtually eliminated. And so that's why we're putting this really right up front in the second month of our work together in that. So of course, the goal of the presentation of value is to build credibility, differentiate yourself, and gain trust, so that you can now gain commitment, close the deal. And you do that by getting a signature, skin in the game. So then you can now engage in aftercare follow-up. So you create rating fans, wow experiences, so then generate referrals, and then move up back to the top. That is the 6 money-making activities, the foundation of a lot of this Better 52. And so, again, we define that sales activity as something you control, and the commitment objective is that piece that I want everybody to have memorized at some point, because the commitment of pieces is green, there's green diamonds over here. It's the goal of each one of these activities. So if I'm prospecting, I want the goal of generating a lead. It's the only way I've been successful. A lot of people will prospect just to do what's called a meet and greet, but there's really, a meet and greet does not contain a commitment objective, which is the goal of each selling activity that requires the client to make that commitment to take and to agree to take some action that will let you both move forward to the next step in the sales process. So again, just recapping some of the stuff before we get into it. So I'll leave you with this question. We'll start off with this question, if you will, of why. Why is it that some loan officers, some salespeople are just much more successful than others? They have the same training, they have access to the same market, the same value propositions. But man, for some reason, they are just way more successful. Why is it that some companies are more successful than others when they're in the same industry and have access to the same consultants and the same capital, but some are just more successful? I think Apple is a great example. Why is it that Apple is just a computer company like Dell and Gateway, but for some reason they out-innovate and outperform their competitors year after year after year, and they're just a computer company, and they will get people to stand in line to buy their products and pay even double the price. And some people will argue that Apple's products aren't even as good or don't do as much, but they've figured out a way to make that happen. Another great example is Dr. Martin Luther King. Why did 250,000 people show up for him that day? He wasn't the only great speaker of the time. He wasn't the only person in the civil rights struggle. But yet, for some reason, 250,000 people came to support him that day. Why is that? I always love Harley Davidson, which is, they're a motorcycle company, but they're also the #1 tattoo in the world. #1. I've never seen a Honda tattoo. But you think about that for a second. Why is it, and if you giggle to yourself when I talk about Honda, why is it that Harley makes sense, but Honda doesn't make sense? I'm always boggled with that question of why. And the reason, and the reality is all 3 of those examples, they think, they act, they lead, and they communicate, all in the exact same sequence. And that sequence is typically the exact opposite of how the rest of us communicate. So what do you think about that? All those examples, you got Apple, you got Dr. Martin Luther King, Harley Davidson, all of those, they think, they act, they lead and communicate in a certain sequence. So we're going to identify that sequence and then turn it into an actual tool. And if you are recognizing some of the things I'm saying, and you're familiar with Simon Sinek in the book that you wrote called Start With Why, and he came up with this concept called the Golden Circle, which is quite possibly one of the simplest models out there. But if you look at this concept of these 3 questions of why, how, and what, why being in green, yellow, how, red, what, and let's identify really what all of those mean for a minute. So the what concept is really everybody knows what they do 100%. Every company knows what they do. That's the easy one. The good companies understand how they do it here in yellow. That would be their unique selling proposition and what makes them different. Very few talk about why it is that they do what they do. And if you're like me, you were taught the sequence of tell people what you do, and how you do it. And if you tell them how you do it in a unique enough manner, you can expect a behavior. No discussion around why. And so really you say, okay, hey, here's what I do, here's how I do it, buy from me. Here's what I do, here's how I do it, vote for me. Here's what I do, here's how I do it, join my team. I mean, you can go that sequence over and over and over again. And so I love the example of Dell. Dell's a great example. They speak to the marketplace just like everyone else does. Excuse me. And they speak from this outside-in approach. And I need to take a drink. Sorry, guys. Hold on a second. The beauty of a recorded webinar is that we can edit all of that out. So now, Dell takes that outside-in approach where they start with why, they talk about how, but they never talk about why. So this is what their message sounds like to the marketplace. So I want you to kind of pay attention to it. So Dell will start with what and go to how. So Dell's message is, we're a great computer company. And the how is, we make custom products delivered to your door at an affordable price. Do you want to buy one? So what question goes to your mind? And it's not why. But the question is, if you're like the other 10,000 people have asked the same question, they're going to say, well, how much is a computer? So we're a great computer company. We can make custom products delivered to your door at an affordable price. Do you want to buy one? Great, how much? And so this question of dollars come up. Let's take an example of being a real estate company. Or let's go with a law firm. We're a great law firm. We hire the best attorneys and send them to the best schools. Do you want to hire us? What question comes to mind? Well, what's your hourly rate? Let's pretend we're a real estate office. We're a great real estate company. We have great marketing programs and have wide distribution of a network to sell your home. Do you want to list your home with us? Well, what's your commission that you charge? If we're a loan officer, I'm a great loan officer. We work with a great company, and I like to take care of my clients and educate people. Do you want to get your home with us? Well, what are your interest rate and closing costs? So this outside-in approach teaches your client to shop you because it doesn't offer a value proposition, one, but secondly, it doesn't speak to the brain in a way that drives action. It only brings up question. And so if every one of this methodology always causes us people to ask the price question, that's why we've trained salespeople to overcome objections and to be ready. And then even more importantly, we've equipped them with what we call marketing manipulators. And a marketing manipulator is something that we can manipulate to drive a behavior. So I can manipulate price. I can lower my price. And if you were all in a room and ask you how many of you on this phone call have ever lowered your price to get a deal? How many of you ever offered a promotion, buy one, get one free? Or if you act now, or used peer pressure. Well, all the best real estate agents are doing something like this. It's that concept of, here's what I do, here's how I do it. Price objection comes, we're going to have to overcome it in some way, shape, or form, typically with some sort of manipulator. Now, the good news is manipulators, price reductions and deals and all that sort of stuff, they work for behavior. And this is a profound statement here. It works for behavior that's required only one time. Let that resonate for a minute. A marketing manipulator is great for behavior that's required only one time. But if I'm understanding you and who's on this call, you don't want just a one-time deal. You're not looking for just a transaction. If I understand what you're looking for, most of you are looking for a loyal, long-term, repeat business type relationship. And so when we're looking at this concept, it's great that, from the outside in, we can drive that one-time transaction. But the next question is how do we get them for the long term? So let's take a look at Apple and how they communicate to the marketplace. They begin with why, and they move their way out. Their message to the marketplace, and I want you to feel the difference. Remember, Dell's was, we're a great computer company. We make custom products delivered to your door at an affordable price. You want to buy one? What's the price? Apple's is this, and remember, feel it. They begin with why and move out. They say, we believe in pushing the bounds of the status quo in everything that we do. We do that by making products that are beautifully designed, easy to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to be a computer company. Do you want to buy one? So let that sink in for a minute. Why did that feel different? Why did it feel inspiring? I always ask people, what word comes to mind? They say clarity. They say focus. They say emotional. They say inspired. I want to be a part of that. And the reason is because of the sequence. In the sequence, think about this. The one thing we all have in common is a brain. And our brain listens to the order in which you tell things. And the order in which you tell things trigger different parts of our brain. And when we talk about what we do. It triggers a part of our brain called Broca's area, which doesn't do much in the brain except decipher language. It's important. It understands what we're saying. But when we begin with why, it triggers a part of the brain that deals with behavior. And so when we speak to that part of the brain, it feels different. It speaks to the part of the brain that deals with emotion, our value center, our memory, all of the things that, if you watch from a functional MRI scan, light the brain up. And so when we change the sequence, we're also changing the sequence in how our brain interprets information. And that's why it felt differently. So then the next question, of course, is how do we translate this concept into how we introduce ourselves and how we take that introduction of who we are and how we position ourselves in the marketplace to the next level. I will urge you, if you like the concept here, buy his book, Start With Why. It is powerful. It is. He now has the #1 TED Talk. If you're not familiar with TEDTalks.com, just go to TED.com. His is #1 watched TED Talk, and it's powerful. I mean, I could not recommend this enough. So one thing that's important to understand about your why is that your why is not something that you invent by looking forward. A lot of times when we're talking about this why conversation, people are looking at forward. What should our why be? The reality is it's something that you discover by looking backwards in your life. Every single behavior that you've engaged in your life has a reason for it. That reason is the why. And you have to learn how to dig back. And we're going to go through some examples of how that works. So I'm going to give you one example of how this works here, and then we're going to move into the concept of framing next. I was in Las Vegas a couple years ago and went through this and presented this, and I asked an audience member who would like to discover what their why is here right now. And it'll only take about 2 to 3 minutes. And gentleman in the front row raises his hand. We get him a microphone. And I say, okay, so sir, what's your name? He says his name's Jonathan. And we followed the typical process of what, then how, and why. I said, so Jonathan, what do you do? And he says, well, I'm a mortgage banker. I said, great. Jonathan, what makes you unique? What's the how? And he sat back and he thought, and he goes, well, I like to educate people. I said, great, Jonathan. Is it your intent for differentiation? He said, yes. I said, well, let's ask the audience. How many people here also like to educate their clients? And as you can guess, every single hand went up in the room. He was a little discouraged. I said, Jonathan, no worries, since we're going actually after a different approach here, and I think you're going to be okay with what you just did there. So I said, Jonathan, you could have chosen anything as your how or your differentiator, but you chose education. You could have chosen to be the lowest cost provider. You could have chosen first-time homebuyer focus. You could have chosen anything, but you chose education. Why? And his response was, why? I'm not sure. I don't know. And I said, well, think about it, because there's a reason. And we gave him about a minute, and it just clicked. You saw his body language change. You saw everything change. And he looks up, and he goes, I never thought about it that way. And I'm giving you sort of the short version here for the webinar. But he goes, my father I'm Jewish, and my father, especially in my culture, education is everything. And I wasn't good at school. And it was one of those things that I was ready to drop out. Me and my friends were going to drop out. When I told my father that I was going to drop out, he lost it on me. The next day he pulled me out of school, pulled me away from my friends, and man, I hated my father at the time for this. And but I realized about a year later what he had done for me. And he's basically, I paused him right there. I said, okay. So we uncovered this why. When it was passionate, it was real. He never thought about it that way. And so I said, Jonathan, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell your story back to you, but I'm going to change the sequence of how I just told it to you. Okay? And I want you to feel the difference. And I asked for a little bit of creative freedom just to make the point and illustrate the point. He said, sure. So I said, I'm going to pretend I'm you, Jonathan. Ask me what I do. He says, so Jonathan, what do you do? I said, and I began with, remember, the why. He started with, I'm a mortgage banker. I said, what do you do? I said, well, I'm Jewish, and in my culture, education is very important, especially to my father. It was something that was instilled in me at a very early age. And for some reason, unfortunately, I wasn't very good. I got involved with the wrong crowd, and school was just not my focus. It wasn't something I was very good at. And for some reason, I decided I was going to drop out of school, and me and my friends, we all got together. We were going to tell our parents we were dropping out. And I remember that day I was pitching the idea to my dad and telling him what I was going to do, and he absolutely lost it on me. It was one of those things, I've never seen him so upset. The next day he pulls me out of that school, pulls me away from my friends. And I mean, tell you, I was so upset. I hated my dad at the time. And then about a year afterwards, I looked back at my friends who actually dropped out of school. I looked at the dead-end jobs that they were part of. I looked at the drugs and legal trouble that they were having and the stupid decisions that they were making. And it dawned on me that, well, my dad didn't just keep me in school, but he gave me the gift of education. That gift of education, I truly believe, saved my life. And so here's the how. I knew at that point that no matter what I did in this world, I wanted to educate people. I wanted to give them the same gift that my father had given me, which was the gift of choice and knowledge. And so I decided to look at an industry that needed somebody that took the time, the energy to sit down with clients, walk them through a difficult process, take the time to understand maybe some of the fears and concerns, and educate them so they can make the best long-term decision for themselves as well as their families. And so I looked at the mortgage and real estate industry, and so currently I happen to be a mortgage banker. So what happened there? What was the difference? Same thing that he said before, completely different sequence. And if anyone else that has heard that same example, instantly, one, he got a standing ovation. He had some tears in his eyes. It was a very powerful moment for him because he never heard his own story that way. And everybody else heard that story thinking, my gosh, they take an instant credibility builder, an instant trust builder. And so when we're looking at this, I want to go back and dissect why that's so important. It's really important to understand this word framing, to understand why it's so powerful. And so let's take a look at framing for a minute. Here's a picture of me a few years ago, and there's a frame around it. The perfect purpose of a frame is to illustrate the content in the middle. In this case, it's my picture. Here I've got a suit on, and there's a stage backdrop. I've got a presenter mouse. I've got a microphone. So the content is basically saying, I'm on stage, I'm presenting. Good. That's a good thing. And so I'm going to keep the content the exact same, and I'm going to change the frame. I want you to tell you, does that change your perception of this? Now, content's the same. You should be really focused on all the content. Don't worry about what the frame looks like. But it's impossible not to. You look at this, and it's almost ridiculous. All you see is me surrounded by hearts and a pink frame, and it does something to affect what it looks like. And so let's take a look at really what framing does. I'm going to ask you this question of what is your favorite color? And I want you to just kind of, if you're with somebody, just say it out loud. And what's your favorite color? I guarantee you that 100% of you, unless you've been in my course, all blurted out your favorite color. And you said, my favorite color is green. My favorite color is blue. My favorite color is this and that. And I'd go around the room and I'd ask. And so then I'd say, okay, ask me my favorite color. So I see Tim is on this call. Tim would say, what's your favorite color? And I would say, well, I was born in Miami, and I moved to Minnesota when I was 7 years old and lived half-time Miami and half-time Minnesota, and it was always hard for me to feel at home. But there was one particular occasion that I always felt at home, was if I could look up and I would see a palm tree. I was in Miami, and I saw a palm tree. I knew instantly that I was surrounded by my people. I was surrounded by my family, my food, my culture, my music, and great weather. And instantly I felt like home. And those palm trees were green, so my favorite color is green. So now I'm using a very ridiculously simple question to illustrate the point. One, if you just answer the question, what's your favorite color? People are going to say, the color. There's nothing else there. But now, what did you learn about me in the way that I answered that question? Well, one, you learned I'm from Miami, and I moved to Minnesota. I lived there half-time. You learned that I love being on the beach. You learned that if I'm from Miami and I'm around my people, my culture, my food, you could probably guess that I'm Cuban. And I like Cuban food. I like Latin music, Cuban music. And so all of this stuff you learn in a 15-second response to a very simple question. Now, I do this to illustrate a very simple. Now, am I saying you should always answer that question, favorite color, that way? No. But I'd say if it's in the right scenario, it's a heck of a lot more interesting. But really what I'm trying to illustrate is the sequence of what it is that I'm doing. What I created for you was a frame around the color green. Now, if I were just to say green and I were wearing a suit, you could say green, oh, maybe he's money hungry, because you're creating a frame for me. If I were to say green and I'm living in Wisconsin, you'd probably say I'm a Green Bay Packers fan. If I were green and I was, maybe somewhere in nature, you might say, well, I'm a tree hugger and I like to do things to save the environment, whatever it is. And so no matter what, and the reason why our brains do this is our brains need a frame to function within. Any information we get, it's based on our frame of reference. If you've had a struggle in life going through something and somebody goes through something similar, you're going to base it upon the frame of your own experience. Sometimes those frames are fair, but more often than not, those frames are very unfair. And so If you don't create the frame for somebody to listen to your content, then guess what? They're going to create one for you. Same is true the moment you say, I'll give you an example. What if you say, well, I want you to go into the industry and become a car salesman? What's the feeling that followed? Well, most people say shyster, liar, dishonest, all sorts of negative words. Now, that's because of the frame that they come from. Now, if your father was or mother was in car sales and they were the most honest, respectable people, and they gave back to their community and they invested in children's education and things like that, then you'd say car salesman was an awesome thing. It all depends on what your frame is. Now, here's the challenge. Anybody in the mortgage industry, you're already starting behind the 8 ball. People have been very frustrated, a lot of stress associated with that industry. And so when you just say, I'm in mortgage, instantly there's all sorts of assumptions that come along with that. And what I'm proposing here, what I'm going to show you, is to not allow that to happen anymore. We're going to show you how to claim that frame and own it before they have a chance to do that. And so it's done through this thing that I created called the influence equation. Now, the influence equation is very simple. You have a timeline here where you have the past, and you have the present, which is now, and the future. The biggest mistake that people make when they're asked a question is they answer in the here and now. And so when I said, what's my favorite color, you all told me red, green, blue, purple, pink, whatever the color is. The difference, what I did, is I went back. I want you to unlearn that. This is really rewiring how you think and how your brain functions and interprets information. But I want you to stop answering things in the here and now. Because you're wired to answer in the here and now. People ask, what's your interest rate and closing costs? Well, they're X. Well, they're going to then compare that to the frame of reference they come from. What I'm saying is that their frame is wrong, because the interest rate doesn't matter. It's the loan program and the trust to make sure your goals are being achieved, because at the end of the day, and afterwards, they're not going to remember the interest rate. But anytime somebody talks about price, they're going to remember price one time. That's the day they buy. But after that, they're not going to remember price. They're going to remember the service and the quality, the relationship, what value that product is delivered for them. They're not going to be thinking about interest rate. And so what I did is I did not answer the here and now. I created a frame, and I told you a story about how I grew up. And that made the value of the data that followed much more valuable. Okay? So I want you to think about just those two steps. We're going to get into this last piece here tied on in a minute. But the concept is we're going to be learning how to claim the frame. Okay? I want you to write that down, remember this, maybe draw this out. But claim the frame is a big piece we're going to do. And if you follow the sequence, I'm going to give you a different example, actually, here. I was helping an executive get ready for a CEO position. It's a very large, multi-billion-dollar company, and they were a high performer. And we're getting her ready. This woman was sharp. She was well put together, extremely articulate, and was honestly one of the most professional people I've ever met. So we put together a mock interview panel where we had 3 or 4 people sitting in front of her, and we asked her questions. And one of the questions that came up was this one of, tell us something that you're proud of. And I want to walk through what she did and then how we changed it. So the question was, tell us something that you're proud of. And again, we're going to also then translate this into how do we resolve the question of, so what do you do? And we're going to learn how to answer that question, not by saying, I'm a mortgage banker. We're going to do it a little bit differently. So the question was, tell us something you're proud of. And, she sat at the edge of her seat. Her posture was perfect. She looked us all in the eye, and she said articulately, she said, well, the answer was, she goes, my last year in school, I got straight A's. And right to the point. She was taught you have to get right to the point. And she goes, my last year in school, I got straight A's. It was something that was very difficult for me to achieve, but I was extremely proud of that moment. It was transitionary for me in my life. Now, what do we have here? The question is, tell us something you're proud of. And she answered it. My last year in school, I got straight A's. So let's take a look back at this equation. What should she not do? Well, she answered the data like we've all been trained to do, but she gave no frame to this. There was no frame. And so when it came back to this answer, everybody said, and they rated her, this is great. She was to the point, it was succinct and clear, and it was confident. And then they asked what I thought, and my first response was, I said, straight A's last year in school? So you're a procrastinator. So you're going to procrastinate for us when you come work for us too? And she looked at me like I was perplexed. I'm like, Mommy and Daddy must have paid for school, huh? Well, it's been nice to be able to slough off and have Mom and Dad foot the bill, and then finally your last year you realize maybe I should probably do something for your parents. And and show that you can get good grades. But in reality, we all know that the last year is the easiest year to get good grades. Now, I was being harsh on purpose, but all I was doing was picking different potential frames that her audience could have been listening to her from. If somebody did work full-time during school and they heard that she got straight A's, they could have put that through, and maybe they had a chip on their shoulder and framed it in a way that was very unfair to her. Here's the lesson for that, though, is you have to understand everything you say is going to be framed. And if you don't frame it, your audience is going to frame it for you. That's why we go back to the concept of claim the frame. And so here's what happened. When I said that, of course, she actually welled up with tears. And I said, hold on a second, I'm doing this to illustrate a reason. And I asked her, went back to it, because I wanted to uncover what was the frame, what was the why behind this. And I asked her, I said, now, you shared that story for a very important reason. I know that's important to you. And she nodded her head. I said, why did you share that? Because you could have shared so many other things. Why was that one so important? And it took about a minute and a half to compose herself. And she shared the reason. Now, I want you to for a minute, think about what frame you put around that answer here. My last year in school, I got straight A's. How did you judge it? Were you lenient? But if you were looking at hiring her, you probably wouldn't be very lenient. You'd probably be trying to scrutinize, trying to figure out what was going on. But I want you to feel the difference when I actually put and reclaim the frame. Okay? Pay attention to how you feel when that happens. So she finally got her composure, and she looks me straight in the eye, and she goes, when you've been told you're stupid your entire life, you tend to believe it. And I had to do something about it. I looked at it. I was either going to believe that forever, or I was going to do something about it. And damn it, I did something about it. Now, when you looked at that, how do you feel when you hear that? What happened for you? Did you feel like most people? You probably felt a rush or a sense of emotional thing. You felt inspired. You felt protective of her. Some emotional reaction happened when you realized that this is somebody, a child being told they were stupid. Most of us, from a justice perspective, say, who in that world would tell a child that? And how unfortunate. And man, look at what she's done with that. And now she's a fighter, man. She perseveres, and the emotion is high. So, explaining what's going on here, she answered here and now. She went back and backfilled the frame, which is a luxury. Not only the frame is also, guess what? The first impression. Sometimes, if we don't do that, whatever first impression is the frame by which everything else happens. So she went back and she had a chance to reclaim that frame, and she told it to us, which totally switched the perception of the answer. But so now, here's the thing. This is only two parts of the equation. At this point, we have now moved the audience. We've brought up emotion. And if you've ever been in a situation where a lot of emotion has been brought up, at the end of that, most people are saying, wow, that was heavy. You'll remember them, but you want to get rid of the emotion. You want to shake it out. Hey, somebody tell a joke, lighten the mood in here. Something like that to lighten the mood. I look at that and say, hold on a second. If you've moved an audience, I imagine all this emotion in the air. My next question is, how do I channel that towards a certain behavior? That's the influence mindset. It's to say, I've moved you, but now what am I going to do with that? I've moved you emotionally. How am I going to channel that emotion towards something? If you think about, the sun is very hot, and it'll heat up the earth. But what happens if you take just a few of those rays and you concentrate them through a magnifying glass? You'll start thinking something on fire. It's the same thing. That is the purpose of this tie-down over here. The tie-down takes all the emotion you created in this framing and then ties it down to a specific behavior going forward. And so when we look at this concept, and I'm going to come back to finish her story. So I'm going to give you the full piece, and I'm going to add the tie-down and how she did this. So remember, the first time she was asked, well, tell us something you're proud of, she told us the information, said, I was proud of my straight A's. And if she was trained on framing, then she'd start with, I was told I was stupid, then tell us the data. But I'm going to walk you through steps 1, 2, and 3 here. We'll frame it, I'm going to give you the data, and then I'm going to tie it down, make it mean something to you. And the tie down is basically answers the question, what this means to you. If you can't answer the question of what this means to you is, then it's something you probably shouldn't share because it doesn't mean anything. Any story, any statistic that you share, you should be able to follow it up. So what that means to you is, and it should mean something. The tie down is where value is created. So for me to be able to have a strong tie down, I have to have an influence objective, okay? And my influence objective in this case is to get hired. I want to get hired. I want the team to say, you know what, this is the kind of person we want next to us, and let's make sure that we hire them. So my influence objective is to get hired, so I'm going to base that on the title. So let's go through the whole process. I want you to feel it, and I want you to feel what happens when I get to the title. So we asked her, tell us something you're proud of. She said, instead of starting with the data, she's going to say, unfortunately, growing up, I was surrounded by adults that told me that I wasn't very smart. And if you're told that by adults as a kid, you tend to act that way, and that's how I did it. It's one of those things that translated to me not being very good in school, and I had a hard time. But I looked at myself, it was my last year in school, and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I said, you know what, I'm either going to believe this forever, or I'm going to do something about it and prove to them that they were wrong and prove to myself that I actually am smart. So I went out and got the help that I needed, got focused, and really, really made the effort. And I'm proud to tell you here that I got straight A's my last year in school. And, man, it felt great to prove them wrong. Now, here's the tie-up. So, John, I'm assuming if I do get a chance to work with you and your team, that there's going to be people out there that are going to tell us some things that we cannot do. There's going to be customers out there that are going to be requiring things, and maybe people within inside the organization that are going to be telling us that we can't do this or it's been done before. And maybe even ask us to do things that maybe seem impossible. But I promise you this, if I get a chance to be next to you and be part of your team, I will approach those same challenges, those same naysayers, with the same passion and the same vigor that I did to overcome them in my own personal life. But I will do that for you and for your team. So, what happened? I've moved you with a frame, gave you the data of the question you asked, then I made it mean something to you. And if you're like most people, the emotion you had was, man, we need to hire this person. I want that person next to me in the trenches. I know what it's like to be, and people are telling me we can't do stuff all the time. I want them. If it's a CEO, then we want people like that on our team. And so in this case, I wanted to illustrate all three of those steps and how that works. But for you to be able to do that, you have to unlearn the natural instinctual reaction to answer questions in the here and now. And so here's the sequence of how you would practice it. And I wish I could have more interaction with you guys. And again, if you have questions, by the way, please, by all means, please put them in there. Brian is going to be managing and tracking those. If you got a hand being raised, I know last week somebody raised their hand and I didn't catch it, but please put your questions in there so we can have that conversation. But the practice sequence is quick. First, I'm going to ask you, what's your favorite color? Okay? And in your mind, for right now, answer that question, but do not say it out loud. Just hold it in your mind. So what's your favorite color? If it's red, don't say it out loud. Just hold on to the color red. And the next piece, ask yourself, why is that my favorite color? Where did it come from? What story comes to mind? And in this sequence, I don't care if it's the perfect story or the best story or even the right story. Even if you want to make one up, we're practicing a new sequence, which is actually rewiring how your brain functions. So what's your favorite color? Don't say it out loud. Hold it in your mind and then say, okay, why is it that X color is my favorite? Where did that story come from? What was it? And then 3, then I want you to start with that answer to that question. Start with telling that story. And the big piece you have to remember is you have to end with, and that's why my favorite color is, insert color. You've got to make sure that you do not say the color till the end. And again, do not get hung up on the fact that this is something as trite and as simple as color. We're learning a new sequence, and we're going to be adding this next question. So what do you do as the next piece? So again, choose the color. Don't say it out loud. Ask yourself, where did that color come from? Why is it my favorite color? And then start with the answer to that question. Make sure you end with the color being last. And so the reason why is, think about telling somebody, you're going to tell a joke and you say the punchline first and then tell the build-up beforehand. It's just not as funny. It's not as entertaining. The reason why, there's no tension there. There's no build-up. The people ask you a question, they're going to remain engaged with you until you give them that answer. And so if you're able to control that frame and claim the frame and then give the answer, you have a much higher likelihood of ensuring that they understood you in the way that you wanted to be understood. So let's go back to this concept here of claiming the frame, giving the data, and then tying it down with this question of, so what do you do? So what do you do? And most people will answer that question of what it is they actually do. What we want to get back to is how Jonathan answered that question and how we got Jonathan to answer that question of where is his why and what is coming. But to get there, you have to work backwards to get there. So let's go through this question. So I want you to ask yourself and write this down. And we're going to go through, what do you do? And write that question down. Maybe it's, I'm a mortgage banker. If you're on this call, you're probably in real estate in some way, shape, or form, either mortgage or real estate. So write that down. I'm a mortgage banker. And then I want you to ask yourself, what is unique about how you do that? What makes you as a mortgage banker unique? And this is the tough part. I don't want you to overthink this or try to wordsmith in a way that a marketing department would say it was great. I want you to keep it simple. If it's caring about somebody, if it's, whatever it is, great service and advice, whatever it is, choose one. Something that you're very proud of, something that you really feel defines who you are or what makes you unique. And think about that for a minute. And then the next question you're going to go to is why did you choose that? What is it about what do you believe about in terms of, is it great passion or great service and advice? If it's education, where did that come from? And here's the thing, because when we're asking that question, we're really uncovering what part of your values are and what your value set is. If you, and the reality is your values have been set and were set at a very young age. This is scientifically proven that part of the brain is wired up really early on in life. And so when I start asking this question and you start talking about things that happened a couple months ago, you're not going deep enough. Typically, your why, and it's something that you're unique, comes from something that your parents did or did not do, or a mentor or coach did or did not do, or some defining moment in your life that you go back to say, if being, let's say, communication was your, I'm a great communicator, was your how. And we ask, where did that come from or why? And sometimes it's parents that were just great communicators and they were good at it. Sometimes maybe their parents were horrible communicators and they vowed to never want to be that way. Or maybe it's, fiscal literacy. And, why? Because their parents were, instilled in them at an early age that, understanding where money flows is an important thing. Or maybe their parents were horrible with money and they vowed to never want to be that way because they saw the stress. So I want you to ask yourself, where did that come from? So what do you do? What makes you unique? And then dive deep, as far deep as you can go to understanding this why concept. And in a minute, I'm going to open this up again, as we always do every week, for questions. So if you've got questions, if you have questions, please raise your hand. Talk to me. Say something. The more we talk together, the more powerful this is. So I'm going to give you a frame of somebody and some people that have really done this well. And these are two friends of mine, and I've looked at their business, and I just thought, the way they did this was fantastic, and they've gotten some pretty interesting results as well. So here's one frame. This person says, well, I have an undying passion and love for Portland, Oregon, and I believe that people would share my passion if they were only aware of all the possibilities in Oregon. So I decided to build a blog spotlighting one new thing to do every day in Portland called 365thingsportland.com. So what are you passionate about? So imagine if that was your opening conversation, or if you were to say, I happen to be a mortgage banker, because this is a mortgage banker. So somebody says, so what do you do? And they say, well, I have an undying passion for Portland, and I believe that people would probably share my passion if they knew what all the possibilities were. So I created this blog spotlighting one new thing to do every day in Portland called 365thingsportland.com. But I'm actually a mortgage banker, but I'd love to learn more about what you're passionate about. A much stronger way to open up a conversation. This was my good friend Annie Galouche out of Portland, Oregon. So she did this, and let's take a look at the results. If you look at her Facebook page, at one point in time when I did this, she had over 23,000 followers. 23,000 followers. I have a Facebook page that I've had up for years, and I'm hovering around 1,000. 23,000. Think about what she built a whole business around that piece. Give you another example of another good friend of mine. His frame, or his why, was, I believe in inspiring people to live life to its fullest by inspiring them to not letting obstacles get in the way of achieving dreams. I did that because I've discovered that by combining video, music, and clean designs, that I can inspire, motivate, and touch many lives with that message. And he also happens to be a loan officer. So what did he do? This is Dustin Hughes. This is Dustin Hughes. Let me tell you his story in a second. But Dustin did this, and he created his site. One video that he created right now has over 743,000, almost 744,000 views on YouTube. If you want to look at motivational video overcoming adversity, it's a fantastic video. something that he created. And you know how much business he got just from creating that video. Now, Dustin's no longer in the mortgage industry. In fact, he's been battling stage 4 brain cancer for the last 3 years and has just been a trooper. I mean, this guy has taken that to a whole other level. Somebody I love very dearly, and somebody who's inspired me to even look at things from this perspective. And he was doing this before the book came out of Why, How, What, and Start With Why. So this is somebody, these two people have been living this. They didn't even know what, excuse me, they didn't even know why it was so successful. And so it's fun to kind of reanalyze that looking backwards. So when we're putting it all together here, I want to think about some what I call entry-level language on how we enter this conversation of what it is that we do and how we do it. And so when you're talking about the why, I love the entry language. I strongly believe, or I'm extremely passionate about, I have a passion for. So when somebody says, what do you do? I love starting in one of those different ways. Next being, the how, your uniqueness. Here's some entry-level language, and Brian will make sure that we get this out to everybody as well, is, well, I've discovered that, or I'm really good at. The way that I bring that to life is, the way that I do that is. These are ways that you can sort of enter the script, if you will, to start putting that together. And, of course, the what, I love using I happen to be, because it just really minimizes and downplays the what, because the what doesn't really matter. The what is something that the people, in the big message of Simon Sinek's book, is that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And so the what doesn't matter. And Apple's a great example of that, because those who buy the why of Apple will not just buy one product. They'll buy their phone from them. They'll buy the MP3 player from them, the Apple or iTunes, and Apple TV, flat screen TVs. And I would say if they had a lasagna, we'd probably want to try that too, just because we believe in their why. And so the last piece, of course, is the call to action. Would you like to? I would love to. But following that sequence now is what really starts putting this tool into play. Now, next week, before we get into questions, we have the industry interview. So I've got Michael Mayer, who's the author, best-selling author of 7 Levels of Communication. If you haven't listened to Michael, if you don't know who he is, he's always a headliner at the Mastery events. He's always a headliner at the Todd Duncan events. He's just a phenomenal guy. He's just a phenomenal speaker. And we're going to have a great conversation next week around how do we take this introduction to a whole other level. And he's got a really cool methodology that not only frames things, but he's got a way of helping the client frame up what the conversation is about just by asking a very pointed series of questions that are very powerful. So make sure that you sign up for next week, and Michael Mayer. It's going to be just a fun conversation. Again, I'm going to ask this question: Who would like to ask questions? How do we apply this? What questions you have? I'm going to leave it out there, Brian. Please make sure you stop me if I've got questions there. And so to not have the dead space, I'm going to move on and make sure that we cover this again. If you have not signed up, please go through and get your free Better Loan Officers account by clicking on For Loan Officers, entering your NMLS ID, and then claiming your profile. For those of you who do want to upgrade to professional membership, we'll give you 30% off here. There's my marketing manipulator, by the way. To sign up, it's normally $294 a year. This will give you right around $100 off. And if you just put in Ethos Pro, all capital, and the dollar sign there as S30, you'll get 30% off. And also, there's an audio series or audio CD that we're giving away for anybody who just signs up for the free profile that I did on the Resurgence of the Sales Professional. So if you sign up, make sure you send Brian an email at brian@betterloanofficers.com, and he will send you a link on how to download that as well there. So again, make sure you sign up. Next week we're doing continuation of this. We got Michael Mayer is going to be joining us, so please make sure you sign up for that as well. So questions. Who's got questions? I'd love to be able to do this. If not, we're going to end this just a little bit early. But who would like to? So we got Chris Randall, who says, for some more whys in the mortgage industry or real estate industry, and then tie it down. Well, frame some more whys. So, Chris, let's. I'm going to see if I can unmute you for a minute, because I'd like to know what you mean by that. Let's see if I can unmute you. Chris, are you there?
I'm here.
Great. So can you expand on your question a little bit more?
I just always think of, it's hard. You have so many whys. And so when I was thinking about this and read the why book, it was actually hard for me to come up with some whys and learn how to tie it down. And I just think that you've worked with so many real estate agents and mortgage people that it would be great for you to tell us about some other people's whys and how they tied it down. And I think there's a little bit of all these things in a lot of us.
Well, Chris, why don't we just do yours live right now?
Oh boy!
Trust me, this is a lot easier than you think. And this is the beauty of this is that. So Mike Shelf asked a question: what if your why is only to make money? So, Mike, great question. So making money is not a why; that's a result. So it's very different. Even if you're getting into business planning, making money is it's an end result. It's not a method or a reason why you're doing it. Because there's reasons why you want to make money, and I'd explore some of those pieces. But great question, and a lot of people ask that same question. So, Chris, let's just follow the methodology real quick here, okay? We'll go back, and let's just go through the question. Where is it here? Okay, so right here. So what do you do?
I'm a loan officer. Mortgage banker.
Okay. All right, perfect. Now, what makes you unique about how you do it? Now, don't get overly concerned with saying it the right way, but what are you proud of in terms of what truly makes you unique?
I give great advice. There's so many people out there getting bad advice. I find them all the time.
Okay. So when you say great